I've seen a lot of ugly things in deep space. Ships torn open like tin cans, bodies frozen in positions that look like they died screaming, and once, a whole mining crew cooked alive when their reactor failed. But nothing prepared me for this. The alien's chest was already open when we found it. Not cut, peeled, like something had reached in with too many fingers and unzipped it from the inside. The rib-like structures weren't bone, not exactly. They were pale, translucent, and still slick, even though the body must have been here for years. The flesh was a shade between ash and mold, and it gave off a smell that wasn't rot exactly, but close enough to make my throat tighten. And inside, right where its heart should have been, was the map. It wasn't paper. It wasn't metal. It was something in between, thin as skin but stiff, and when I touched it, it pulsed. The surface writhed in faint lines, curling and stretching like ink bleeding in water. The lines shifted as I looked at them, as if they didn't want to be understood. And then, just for a moment, the lines moved into shapes I recognized. Shapes that looked a lot like star systems. The worst part wasn't that the alien had a map inside its chest. The worst part was that the map wasn't dead. It was breathing. I stumbled back, my helmet fogging as I cursed under my breath. Hayes was standing behind me, his helmet light catching the slick curve of the alien's exposed ribs. "What the hell is that?" he whispered. "I think it's showing us somewhere," I said, though my voice shook. Hayes leaned closer, his gloved hand almost brushing the thing. "Then where's it pointing?" I swallowed. "I don't think it's pointing. I think it's calling." That was 12 hours ago. 12 hours before I realized the thing inside the corpse had already heard us. We'd picked up the derelict on long-range scans 3 days earlier. No transponder, no registry. Just a cold lump drifting at the far edge of the Lascar belt, where the ice and rock drift so slow it's like time doesn't work right. At first, we thought it was a junk hauler that had lost power and frozen over. It had the shape, long, narrow, reinforced spine with cargo holds like swollen vertebrae. But when we got closer, the hull was wrong. It wasn't just pitted from micrometeorites. It was scarred, as if something had scraped along the metal with claws the size of lifeboats. Some of the gashes were deep enough to see inside, where strange web struts held the ship's skeleton together. None of it matched any human design. Captain Vera had been running salvage crews for 30 years, and she wasn't afraid of much. But she stared at that hull a long time before giving the order to dock. "We tag it, log it, and pull what we can," she said finally. "No wandering. No hero runs. We're in and out in 2 hours." We all agreed. At least, that's what we told ourselves. The docking was rough. The derelict wasn't spinning exactly, but it had a slow, drunken drift, like something moving through syrup. Every time it rolled, the light from our ship caught its surface and made the scars flash pale silver. When the mag clamps hit, the sound echoed through our hull like a dull hammer strike. The airlock hissed open to darkness. Not the kind of darkness you get on a ship with the lights off. This was thicker, heavier. Dust motes hung in the beam of my helmet, like they didn't want to move. The corridors were narrow, the walls coated in a textured material that crumbled when you brushed it. It wasn't paint. The first thing we noticed was the smell. Even through the helmet's filters, it came through dry and metallic, like old coins soaked in spoiled milk. We split into pairs. Me and Hayes took port side. Vera and Sandoval went aft. The plan was to sweep, mark the sections, and meet back in the docking bay in 40 minutes. I wish we'd stuck to that. We found the alien in what looked like a med bay, or what had once been one. Beds lined the wall, though they weren't shaped for anything human. The ceiling sagged with torn cables, and the floor was littered with shards of something brittle. I thought it was glass until I realized they were fragments of bone. It was lying on the third bed, strapped down by what looked like its own skin. At first, I thought it was a corpse that had been experimented on. Then I noticed there were no cuts from tools. The body had opened from within, like something had pressed out until the chest split. The restraints hadn't failed. It had been tied down after the chest burst. Hayes' voice was tight in my comms. Why would they tie it down after? I didn't answer. I'd stepped closer, the beam from my helmet catching on the thing in its chest cavity. I thought it was a tumor at first. Then I saw the patterns moving. The lines shifted like they were alive, curling into spirals that opened into shapes I couldn't name. The longer I looked, the more I felt my stomach twist. Not from disgust, but from a strange sense of recognition, like I'd seen the patterns before in a dream I wasn't supposed to remember. When I reached out, the lines stilled, and then they shifted into something else, something that looked a lot like a cluster of stars. That's when it hit me. This wasn't art. This wasn't a wound. This was a map. But it didn't lead anywhere good. Because as soon as I saw it, I swear I heard something breathing. Not in the room. Not in the ship. In my head. And that's when I realized we hadn't found this thing. It had found us. We should have left the moment we saw the body. Hell, we should have left the moment we saw the scars on the hull. But the thing about salvage crews is that curiosity is a disease. You can't just scrape at the surface of something strange and walk away. Not when there's a chance the next bulkhead might hold tech no one on Earth has ever seen. Not when every step into the dark could mean a payday big enough to buy you out of every debt you've ever owed. So instead of reporting the alien corpse and getting the hell out, we kept going. Hayes and I sealed the medbay behind us, dropping a beacon marker so the captain could see our location on her HUD. I didn't say what I'd really seen inside that chest cavity, the living, breathing map. If I spoke it out loud, I think I knew it would sound insane. Instead, I just said, found a body, not human. Vera came back on comms a second later. Her voice was strained. Copy that. Me and Sandoval found more damage in the aft. Whole section collapsed. Keep moving. She didn't ask questions about the corpse. That bothered me more than if she had. The deeper we went, the less the ship felt like a ship. It wasn't just a layout, though that was wrong enough. The corridors twisted at unnatural angles, like they'd been grown instead of built. In some places the floor sloped, so that walking felt like moving through the belly of some giant animal. The walls weren't smooth plating, but ridged and faintly porous, the texture catching on our gloves when we steadied ourselves. There were markings too. Not paint, not burn, not scratches from combat. They were shallow grooves running in precise curves, repeating every few meters. I didn't recognize them, but they made my teeth hurt when I looked too long. Twice, I caught Hayes stopping to stare at one. Both times he swore he'd heard a faint hum coming from inside the wall. The sound in that ship was wrong. Our suit mics picked up every boot step and every slow breath like they were happening in a tomb. But every so often, there'd be something else. A creak with no source, a wet rustle from deeper inside, a distant knock that made you freeze until you realized you couldn't tell which direction it came from. At one point, we passed what I thought was a sealed hatch until my light caught something just past a gap in the metal. Something moving. Not quickly. Just shifting like a slow inhale. Hayes didn't see it, and I didn't mention it. We reached a junction where the corridor split into three. My HUD showed faint returns from the left path, a cluster of shapes that might have been containers. We check it out? Hayes asked. I hesitated. 2 minutes. No more. We headed left. The room we stepped into was wide, low ceiling, the air thick with dust. My boots crunched over debris that looked like broken glass, but felt soft underfoot. It wasn't until my light hit one of the piles that I realized they were shells. Like eggs. Most of them were shattered from the inside. Hayes bent down to pick up a shard, then froze. This is warm. That was impossible. The ship's interior temperature was below freezing everywhere else. I took the shard from him. He was right. Faintly, almost like body heat. The edges of the fragment were smooth and slightly translucent, with veins running through it like blood vessels. We didn't speak as we backed out of that room. The next corridor took us downward. I couldn't tell if it was actually sloping or if the ship itself had shifted in space over the years, but it felt like we were being led somewhere. The lighting was worse here. Our helmet beams seemed to fall short, swallowed up before they hit the far walls. The smell was stronger too, cutting through the filters in a way that made my stomach twist. Halfway down, Hayes stopped and grabbed my arm. Did you hear that? I did. A faint tapping, like metal on glass. Slow, deliberate. 3 taps, then silence. Then 2 more. It didn't echo. It was close. We swung our lights around. Nothing. just the curve of the corridor ahead, and the darkness behind. We reached what I can only call the central chamber, though it didn't look like any control room I'd seen. The space was spherical, the walls lined with protrusions like growths of coral. Cables dangled like roots, swaying gently in the stale air. In the middle hung a massive object, suspended by strands of some glistening material that wasn't wire. It looked like a cocoon. The surface shifted as we approached, as though something inside had turned over. My chest tightened. I could feel my pulse in my throat. Hayes whispered, "Is it alive?" "I don't want to know," I said, though I couldn't stop staring. That's when our comms crackled. It wasn't Vera. It wasn't Sandoval. The voice that came through was faint, distorted, but the words were clear enough to freeze me in place. "You shouldn't be here." Hayes spun, scanning the room. "Who's on this channel?" he demanded. No answer, just static. Then, from the cocoon came the faintest sound, not speech, but something almost like breathing, only it matched the rhythm of my own. I don't remember leaving that chamber. 1 second we were staring at it. The next we were back in the junction, both of us breathing too fast, our helmet lights jerking over the walls like we expected them to move. Neither of us said a word. When we finally reached the docking bay, Vera and Sandoval were already there. Sandoval's visor was cracked, not punctured, but fractured like something had hit it hard. Vera's voice was low. "We found the bridge, or what's left of it. It's not empty." That was the moment I realized something important. We've been calling this a derelict since the moment we found it, but a derelict is dead. This ship was only sleeping. We could have left then. We should have left then. But Captain Vera was already talking about cataloging. "One last sweep," she said, as if saying out loud made it less dangerous. "We've got visuals on the bridge, the cargo bays, and whatever the hell that chamber was. But the med bay," she looked at me. "You and Hayes said there's a body there." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, not human. Strapped down. Chest cavities open. Then we're documenting it before we leave." I wanted to argue, not because I didn't want the credit, part of me did, but because the memory of that map in its chest was still crawling around in my head. The lines shifting, the way they'd still when I touched them, and that moment when I swore I'd heard breathing inside my skull. But Vera was captain, and on a salvage run, captain's word is law. We retraced our steps. This time, Vera came with us. Sandoval stayed behind to watch the docking bay, or maybe because he didn't want to see the med bay again. The corridors felt different going back. Smaller, as if the walls had shifted in our absence. I kept catching glimpses of things in the corners of my light. Ridges along the wall that weren't there before, faint indentations that looked too much like fingerprints. Hayes noticed it too. "You feel like," he whispered on the comms, "like it's watching?" "Yes," I said, because lying wouldn't help. When we reached the med bay, nothing had moved, or at least nothing obvious. The alien body was still strapped to the bed, chest peeled open like an obscene display. The skin, if it was skin, had dried around the edges, curling back to reveal more of the pale, translucent rib structures. The map was still there, glistening faintly in the beam of my helmet. Vera stepped up beside me. "Jesus." "Not Jesus," Hayes muttered. "Not anything close." Vera knelt, pulling a handheld scanner from her belt. The device hummed as she passed it over the body. "Organic," she murmured. "Not plant, not human. Skeletal structures. I don't even know. Dense. And that, she aimed the scanner at the map. That's not reading right." "What do you mean?" I asked. She turned the scanner so I could see. The display was showing a shifting pattern of energy spikes, like static caught in a loop. "It's not inert. It's active. And," she hesitated, "it's reacting to us." I didn't need a scanner to know that, because as I stepped closer, the lines on the map started moving again. Slow at first, curling like smoke in still air, then faster, forming clusters and spirals. I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't random. It was searching. The shapes shifted into something almost familiar. Points of light connected by thin arcs. Stars. Definitely stars. A whole cluster of them, scattered across a dark background. Then the arcs began to change. They weren't lines anymore. They were paths. And every single path led toward one central point. Hayes leaned in. That's a star system. Has to be. I think it's more than that, I said. I think it's an origin point. Vera frowned. Origin of what? Before I could answer, the map pulsed. Not just visually, I felt it like the floor had shifted under my boots. The lines flashed in a rhythm that made the hair on my arm stand up, and then my comms crackled. A voice, low, distorted, but unmistakable. Come back. Hayes's head jerked up. Tell me you heard that. I heard it, I said. Vera's voice was sharp. That wasn't from our channel. She checked her wrist display, cycling through frequencies. That came from inside the ship. I don't know why I did it, but I reached out. My glove touched the surface of the map. It was warm, too warm, like touching living flesh. The moment I made contact, the shifting lines froze. The entire med bay seemed to tighten, the shadows stretching toward us like they'd been pulled. And then the map opened. That's the only way I can describe it. 1 second it was a flat sheet. The next it was three-dimensional. Star systems suspended in a floating lattice of light. My eyes watered as I stared, not because it was bright, but because it was wrong. The distances didn't make sense. The angles were impossible. It was like trying to read a map drawn by something that didn't see space the way we did. But I recognized one thing, our location. We were on the map, and the map was highlighting us. Vera swore under her breath. It's tracking us. No, I said slowly. It's marking us. The voice came again, clearer this time. Come back. Come back. Come back. The words repeated, faster and faster, until they blurred into a low hum. My helmet display flickered. Hayes backed up, his light jerking across the walls. We need to leave. Now. Vera didn't argue. We started toward the door. But as I looked back, the alien's head had shifted, just slightly, enough that I could see its mouth was open wider than before. And I swear to God, it was smiling. We didn't run, not yet, but I couldn't shake the feeling that leaving the med bay hadn't broken the connection. The map was still in my head, burned there like an afterimage. And the worst part was I could still feel it breathing. We left the med bay without speaking. Some things you don't talk about in the moment, because the moment you give them words, you make them real. But the silence didn't make it go away. The map was still there in my head, burning bright and impossible. It didn't feel like a memory. It felt like something had moved in. By the time we reached the docking bay, my pulse was pounding in my ears. Sandoval looked up from where he was kneeling beside the clamps, his cracked visor glinting in the helmet lights. Everything good? He asked. No one answered. Vera was the first to break. We're pulling back, she said flatly. The thing in that med bay isn't salvage. It's bait. That got everyone's attention. Bait for what? Hayes asked. She hesitated just a beat too long. Doesn't matter. We're detaching in 10. We move fast, or as fast as you can in vacuum suits. Hayes and I started sealing the crates of scrap we'd collected earlier. Sandoval went to check the mag clamps. Vera was already at the hatch, cycling through docking procedures. That's when the lights went out. Not a flicker, not a dim. One moment our helmet beams were bouncing off the docking bay walls. The next we were in absolute blackness. My suit HUD still worked, but the comms crackled with distortion. I heard Hayes curse, then Sandoval's voice break in. Clamp release isn't responding. Vera's voice came back, tight and clipped. Override it. I did override it, Sandoval snapped. It's locked. Locked. That was impossible. The clamps were mechanical. If power failed, they released by default. That meant something was holding us. The comms hissed again, and for a second, I thought it was more interference. Then I realized I was hearing breathing. Slow, deep, deliberate, not from any of us. And then layered under it, a voice. Stay. It was the same voice from the med bay. Only now it wasn't distant. It was inside my head. I don't remember moving to the nearest crate. I just remember digging through it until I found a handheld scanner. If the thing was broadcasting some kind of signal, I could... The display flared, then went black. The scanner was dead. So was my wrist display. And Hayes's. And Sandoval's. The ship was killing our tech. We have to cut the clamps manually, Vera said. Hayes with me. Sandoval, you keep trying to release. Cole, she looked at me. You figure out where the signal's coming from. Signal? I said, but I already knew. The map. I didn't want to go back to the med bay. Every nerve in my body screamed against it. But as soon as I started moving down the corridor, I realized the path had changed. The walls seemed closer, the air heavier. My helmet light barely cut through the gloom. And somewhere, faint but constant, I could hear that hum, the one that made my teeth ache. When I reached the med bay, the door was open. I hadn't left it that way. The alien was still strapped down, but the map in its chest wasn't just glowing now, it was spreading. Thin, vein-like strands had crept out along the ribs, up the neck, down the arms. They pulsed faintly like a heartbeat, and the shapes on its surface, they'd changed. They were no longer just a cluster of stars. They were routes, dozens of them, spiderwebbing outward from a single point. My point, the Derelict's location, was at the exact center of it all. I stepped closer, against every instinct I had. The hum grew louder, and with it, a low whisper, too soft to make out words, but rhythmic, almost like a chant. Then, without warning, the map projected. Light flooded the room, and suddenly the med bay was gone, replaced by a vast, three-dimensional field of stars hanging in the air. My stomach lurched as the projection moved, sweeping past entire systems, zooming in on worlds I didn't recognize. Some were blue-green like Earth, others black and cracked, others glowing red with volcanic fire. The routes connected them all, pulsing faintly in sequence, like something moving along them. And then the view shifted. I was no longer seeing the stars from above. I was seeing them from within, flying to the void, rushing past dead moons, diving toward a pale, cold sun, straight into a planet made of nothing but bone. I staggered back. My shoulder hit the wall hard enough to send a dull shock through my suit. The vision shattered, the med bay snapping back into place. The alien's face, or what was left of it, seemed closer now, its jaw unhinged slightly wider. And then I realized the hum wasn't just in my ears anymore. It was vibrating through the floor, through the whole ship. When I made it back to the docking bay, Vera was there, helmet off, eyes wild. Clamps are fused, like something melted them in place. Hayes's voice came in over comms. And it's not just the clamps. The engines won't start. Power grid's unresponsive. Sandoval was pale. It's keeping us here. I opened my mouth to say something, but then my vision blurred, not a blackout, but a replacement. For a split second, I saw the map again, overlaid across reality. Only now, every route led straight to us, and something was moving along them, fast. That was when I finally understood. The map wasn't showing us a destination. It was showing everything else where to find us. The first time I heard it clearly, I thought it was my own heartbeat. The second time, I realized it was something else's. It started as a deep, distant thud, slow and steady, like the sound of a drum echoing underwater. But it wasn't in the air. It was inside my skull, vibrating through my jaw and behind my eyes. Every time it pulsed, I could see the map in my head flash brighter, the lines stretching out into that impossible web of routes. Something was using it. Vera slammed her fist against the control panel by the hatch. Manual override's dead. It's locked us in. Hayes's voice came through, ragged. The power relays are fused solid. Whatever's in this ship, it's cooking the circuits. We can't get them back without stripping half the panels. Sandoval was pacing in the narrow space, visor off, his breath fogging in the cold air. "We're not alone here," he muttered. "We've been hearing it the whole time. The knocks, the breathing. That's not just the hull settling. It's moving." I didn't tell him the worst part, that it wasn't just moving inside the ship. It was moving toward the ship. I'd seen in the vision from the med bay. Something crawling along those routes, closing the distance with every beat of that impossible heart. We argued for all of 30 seconds before Vera made the call. We can't break free, we find the source. Whatever's holding us, disable it, destroy it, whatever it takes. Hayes gave a humorless laugh. That means going deeper. No one liked it. No one wanted it. But none of us wanted to sit in the docking bay waiting for whatever the map had called to arrive, either. We split again, even though every instinct said we should stick together. Vera and Sandoval took one path, me and Hayes another. The plan was to sweep the central corridors, converge on the spherical chamber we'd seen earlier, and meet at the cocoon. The deeper we went, the louder the thud became. Not in volume, in presence. I could feel in my teeth, my bones. My vision would twitch with each pulse, like the world was skipping a frame. Hayes whispered, "It's speeding up." He was right. Whatever was coming, it was moving faster. The corridors twisted in ways that made no sense. We'd turn left and find ourselves back where we started. Stairs led downward, only to spill us into rooms we'd already cleared. Once, we opened a hatch and found the med bay, even though I was sure we'd been heading away from it. The alien's head had turned further, its empty eyes fixed on the door. I shut it before it could do anything else. By the time we reached the spherical chamber, the air felt different, heavy, almost wet. My helmet light hit the cocoon in the center, and for a second I thought it was the same as before. Then I saw the movement. It was breathing. The strands suspending it weren't still anymore. They twitched, flexed, tightening and loosening in a rhythm that matched the thud in my head. The surface bulged in places, as if something inside was shifting position. And then the voice came again. Not over comms this time. Not even in my head. It was in the room. Almost here. Hayes backed up so fast he hit the wall. "We have to go. We have to." The cocoon shuddered violently, and a single strand snapped free, lashing across the floor. Where it hit, the metal hissed and smoked, as if eaten away by acid. That was enough for both of us. We bolted. We ran until the corridor bent and opened into a narrow observation bay. The glass, or what passed for it, was streaked with frost, but beyond it was the black of deep space. And there, in the far distance, was movement. Not ships, not asteroids. Something else. Shapes gliding between the stars, blotting out the light as they passed. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, each one following the same trajectory. Hayes said what I was thinking. "They're coming here." I didn't answer, because even from that distance, I could see the way they moved, too smooth, too fluid, like they weren't traveling through space, but wearing it. We got back to the docking bay to find Vera and Sandoval already there, both looking pale. "Found it," Vera said. "The source is in the cocoon. That's something else. The signal's coming from deeper, from below the main deck." "Below?" Hayes frowned. "There's no below. This isn't a human design." "Yeah," Vera said, "which is why we're cutting into it." Sandoval tossed a satchel onto the floor, demolition charges. The plan was simple. Find the core of the signal, blow it, hope the ship's grip on us broke before whatever was following the routes arrived. But as I looked at the charges, all I could think about was the map's projection, and the way every path had led directly to our position. Destroying the signal might cut the beacon, or it might just make the things out there speed up. As we headed for the lower decks, I realized the thud had changed. It wasn't a heartbeat anymore. It was footsteps. I don't know if it was desperation or arrogance that made us think we could stop it. Maybe both. We moved fast, or at least tried to. The deeper we went, the stranger the corridors became. The deck plating buckled in places, forcing us to climb over warped ridges that pulsed faintly under our boots. The walls sweated condensation that steamed in the cold air. In some stretches, the ceiling dipped low enough that we had to crouch, our helmet lights catching on strands of something fibrous hanging like wet roots. Every so often, the thud came again. Louder now. Closer. My jaw ached from clenching against it. I couldn't tell if it was still coming from my head, or if the whole ship had started to breathe in sync with it. We reached the lower section by cutting through a bulkhead that wasn't meant to be opened. Sandoval planted a charge the size of his fist, the muffled blast echoing strangely through the walls. The smoke cleared to reveal a shaft sloping downward into absolute dark. Vera went first, no hesitation. Hayes followed, then Sandoval, then me. The smell hit halfway down, thick chemical and sweet, like burning sugar mixed with ammonia. My visor display flickered again, and for a heartbeat, I thought I saw the map overlay itself across the walls, routes branching out in all directions. Only now, some of those routes weren't lines. They were veins. At the bottom of the shaft was a chamber unlike anything we'd seen. The walls were slick, almost organic, and the floor sloped toward the center, where a massive structure rose like a frozen whirlpool. It was alive, not in the twitching, breathing way of the cocoon upstairs. This thing pulsed, the whole surface flexing with every beat of that impossible heart. Embedded in it were shapes I recognized instantly. Fragments of metal, shredded hull plating, entire sections of ships crushed and half digested. The Derelict had been eating other vessels. And in the center, buried deep in that throbbing mass, was the source of the signal. A black sphere the size of a man's head, suspended in a cage of bone-like spines. "That's it," Vera said. Sandoval set the charges. He didn't move. He was staring at the sphere, his eyes wide, his lips moving like he was whispering something. Sandoval. Vera snapped. He jerked like waking from a dream and started working, planting charges around the base of the structure. But I could see his hands shaking. The thud had become a constant now. And with it came something worse, a pressure in my head, pushing against my thoughts like fingers probing through soft clay. Images flashed in my mind. The map's routes, worlds burning, shapes moving through the dark. And under it all, a voice. "You are the path." Sandoval finished arming the last charge. Vera gave the order, and we scrambled back toward the shaft. The explosion was deep and heavy, more felt than heard. The floor bucked under us, and for a second I thought the chamber was collapsing. Then the sound hit, a low, resonant howl that went on until I felt it in my teeth. The sphere hadn't just been a beacon. It had been a lock. Every panel on my visor went black for a split second. When it came back, the map was there again, burned across my vision. Only now, the routes weren't faint lines. They were rivers of light, surging toward our position. The things out there had been waiting for the signal to end. Now they were free to come. The ship reacted instantly. The walls flexed, corridors twisting and sealing behind us as we ran. I could hear something moving through the decks above, heavy wet impacts like meat hitting metal. The lights in my helmet caught flashes through gaps in the walls. Slick limbs sliding past, eyes that reflected the beam for just an instant before vanishing. Hayes was breathing too fast. "They're already here," he panted. "No," I said without thinking. "They've always been here." We burst back into the upper levels. The air hotter now, the smell almost unbearable. The docking bay was straight ahead. If the ship hadn't sealed it off, it had. The hatch was fused shut, metal warped inward like it had been gripped by something immense. Behind us, the corridor we'd come from closed like a throat, ridges sealing over in seconds. And in the sudden silence, the voice came again. Not in my head this time. Not in the comms. From right behind us. "Found you." We turned as one. It was there, not fully visible, not yet, but forming. The air shimmered like heat haze, shapes coalescing in it. Limbs too long, a torso that bent in ways it shouldn't, a head that unfolded like petals around a mouth full of blacklight. The walls around it pulsed, the same rhythm as that endless thud, and then it stepped forward. The deck groaned under its weight, but there was no sound of breath, no smell beyond the reek of the ship itself. It didn't need air. It didn't need anything we understood. We ran, not because we thought we could escape, but because standing still would mean letting it touch us. And in the deep animal part of my brain, I knew that if it touched me, I wouldn't die. I'd become part of the map. We didn't make it far. The corridors folded in on themselves, reshaping with wet, grinding sounds. Every turn leading us back to the same place. The warped docking hatch. We hit again and again, Hayes slamming his rifle, but into the metal until the stock cracked. It didn't matter. The ship wasn't just closing us in. It was keeping us. The thing in the haze was closer now. The shimmer around it peeled away in strands, revealing skin like burnished glass, translucent enough that I could see shapes moving inside it. Not organs, not bones, routes, the same kind I'd seen on the map. Vera raised her rifle and opened fire, the sound deafening in the narrow space. The thing didn't flinch. Bullets entered it like stones thrown into deep water, ripples spreading across its surface before vanishing completely. Then it spoke again, not through sound, through space. The air in front of my face bent as the words arrived without passing through my ears. Not a map, a seed. I staggered back, clutching my helmet like I could block it out, but the voice was already inside. It pressed against my thoughts, peeling them open, rifling through memories like a thief in a dark room. I saw flashes of my life. Earth's sun to the clouds, my first shuttle launch, the sterile hum of orbital stations, all reduced to meaningless landmarks in a terrain it was mapping. It wasn't showing me the way somewhere. It was turning me into the way. Sandoval screamed. I spun and saw the thing's arm, if you could call it that, lancing through his chest. There was no blood. His body convulsed, his skin blanching as pale lines spread across it, glowing faintly from beneath. They matched the routes on the map exactly. The thing withdrew, and Sandoval stayed on his feet for a moment, eyes wide and glassy. Then he turned and walked past US, deeper into the ship, moving like a sleepwalker. The walls opened for him. We never saw him again. Hayes was next. It didn't even touch him. He just stopped, turned toward the thing, and stepped forward. The shimmer enveloped him like a veil, and when it dropped away, he was gone. Only Vera and I remained. She grabbed my arm, eyes blazing behind her visor. "It's not here to kill us," she hissed. "It's here to plant us." We ran, not because there was anywhere to go, but because motion felt like defiance. The corridors shifted, always leading us back toward the chamber with Cocoon and the empty alcoves. Only now, one of those alcoves wasn't empty. Inside it stood a shape just like the alien corpse we found earlier, still blackened and split open from the chest. And inside, faintly glowing, was another map. I realized then that the alien we cut open hadn't died escaping the creature. It had been sent carrying the seed to another world. Just like we would be. We reached the cocoon chamber again, and this time the creature followed us in. The walls swelled and pulsed in time with its steps. My helmet display went white, then black, then lit with an image that wasn't from my visor at all. A view of stars spinning, routes branching, converging, spreading toward countless points of light. Worlds, systems, civilizations, all marked for planting. Vera turned to me, her voice shaking but steady. "We can't let it take us alive." She pulled the last of her explosives from her pack, shoving them into my hands. "When it gets close, you detonate. Don't hesitate." I started to protest, but she was already moving, stepping toward the thing. Her rifle clattered to the floor as she tore off her helmet, exposing her face to the hot, stinking air. The creature paused, as if curious. Then it reached for her. I armed the detonator. The light on it blinked. Too slow, too steady for the panic flooding my veins. Vera locked eyes with me one last time, and I understood she wasn't buying us escape. She was buying me choice. When the creature's arm pierced her, the glow spread instantly, tracing the map across her skin. She gasped once, then went still. I hit the trigger. The blast ripped through the chamber, fire and shrapnel tearing into the walls. The creature staggered, its body rippling and distorting, but it didn't fall. The walls screamed, not mechanically, but like a living thing in pain. The deck gave way beneath me, and I fell into blackness. When I woke, I was drifting. My suit was breached, my oxygen low. I could see the derelict in the distance, torn open and spilling debris into the void. No sign of the creature. No sign of Vera. But on my visor, burned into the cracked display, the map still glowed. And when I closed my eyes, I could feel it, not leading me away from the derelict, leading me to something else. I don't know how much longer I have before the rescue ship finds me. I just know one thing. They won't be finding me alone, because somewhere in the dark, the seed has already taken root.